Welcome back to Building What We've Learned, the series where I read something interesting and then make a Minecraft build inspired by it. Today we are talking about the story of Conall Yellowclaw, a famous Scottish folktale which I absolutely fell in love with. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. The first thing to understand about folklore is that it does not exist in isolation. Folkloric patterns, especially tales from Scotland and Ireland, can connect their stories not just to others in the British Isle, but also in surviving Norse tales. The story of a hero and the journey they go through is iconic in these tales, to the point where we can meet a hero later in their life and still know their story. Conall was a simple man and a good citizen. He had a beautiful wife and, depending on the telling, 3 to 4 sons, whom he cared for greatly. He and his family lived during a time where the land around them was divided up into 5 kingdoms, with 5 separate ruling families who all despised each other. Conall lived close to one of these kings, and his sons were friends with the king's sons. They would often be together during the days where they were not busy with family duties. One day, the boys began to argue, and their fight became violent. Weapons were drawn, and Conall's sons attacked the eldest prince of the kingdom, and the princes fought back with equal ferocity. Soon, one of Conall's sons got the upper hand in the fight, but their blows became too great, and they ended up killing the prince. The king immediately had Conall's sons arrested and summoned their father to the court. The king told Conall that he would have no pleasure in revenge, but did not know how else to punish the family for the murder. Conall pleaded with the king, saying that if his sons were spared, he would do anything, complete any task the king would request of him. Conall had a grand reputation of being an adventurer, and a hero to his people which he had earned during his youth. He had survived with many scars to tell the tales of his impossible journeys, and the king knew this. He told Conall that if he wished to save the lives of his sons, he would have to journey to the next kingdom of Lochlan, modern-day Norway, and steal the king's favorite horse. If Conall was caught, he would be killed and his sons would die. Conall agreed, and he was allowed to take his sons with him, and together they set off on the journey. By the time they reached the next kingdom, the family had no idea how to accomplish this impossible task. Not knowing what else to do, Conall found the home of a childhood friend, who he had not spoken to in many years. The man owed Conall a great debt from their time together, and he had never had a chance to pay it back. Conall's friends allowed them shelter for the night, and as the boys slept, Conall told the man of the situation, how his family would be killed should they fail. The friend told them that his farm was the one which the grain for the king's horses was harvested. Together they planned for the family to hide within the bags that the soldiers would collect the next day, to be carried off to the stables directly. The next day the family hid within the sacks and were carried off into the castle. Once they were alone, the family left their hiding place and found the king's favorite horse. During their attempt to wake the horse so they may steal it, one of the boys tripped in the uneven stall. The great horse was young and easily frightened, and immediately began making loud calls and noises to alert the guards. Soon the stables were rushed, and despite their attempts to hide, the family was found amongst the grain. The father and his sons were brought before the king of the land, a young ruler who had heard the tales of Conall as he grew. The king demanded to know the reason behind Conall being there, and Conall agreed to tell the truth. The king listened to this story and agreed not to hang Conall and would spare the friend, who had helped them due to needing to fulfill a life debt. However, Conall's sons would not be so lucky. Conall once again pleaded for anything he could do to spare his sons. King thought about all the stories he had heard of Conall and told him that if Conall could tell the king a story of a situation more perilous than this, then he would spare one of Conall's sons. Conall agreed and began to tell a story of his youth. When he was small, his family owned a large swath of land and cattle. One day, when Conall was just beginning to be trusted to do chores on his own, he and a friend were helping to collect baby cows when it began to rain and storm. The 2 children were forced to take shelter in a small hut and bring a mother cow and a calf with them. Soon their shelter began to attract a large number of cats. These cats were large and intelligent, smart enough to speak and scheme. Their leader was a large orange and white colored cat who looked at Conall and spoke his name, telling him that they were about to sing a song of the great Conall Yellowclaw. The cat sang a song as they slowly crept closer to the children. Once they were finished, the orange cat asked Conall what he would pay them as a reward for their singing. Conall looked at the small calf in his arms, which was the only thing he had on him. The cats immediately pounced and devoured the calf right before Conall's eyes, before looking at him and began to sing another song. Once again, they demanded a reward, and once again, Conall had nothing. The only thing he could offer was the mother cow, and he once again watched as the cats devoured it. For a third time, the cat spoke to him, and for a third time, Conall had nothing on him, only a friend that he had brought with him. The small boy immediately set off running, and the cats followed, as Conall ran in the other direction. Conall attempted to hide himself in the trees where the cats could not reach him. He watched the cats claw at the tree and tear up the roots, attempting to force him down. From his position high in the air, he could make out a hunting party in the distance and cried for their help. Just as the tree collapsed, the hunting party reached them. Conall drew a blade from one of the hunter's pouches and fought with the hunting party against the giant cats. The fight was hard and many were injured, but the cats were eventually defeated and the humans survived. Conall finished telling the king the story by showing the scars he had got from the battle, and the king agreed that he would spare the youngest of the sons. Still, 3 remained to be hanged, and the king told Conall that he would need to tell a tale even more perilous than the cat, should his next son be spared. So Conall told the story from when he was young and spent his time walking along the shore. One day he fell into a crack among the rocks into a large hole. He survived uninjured due to landing on a large pile of hay and manure. It wasn't long before a great giant came down the tunnel that connected to the hole, herding his goats to the hay. The giant, despite being blind in one eye, spotted Conall immediately and picked up the boy in his massive hand and began to squeeze him. Conall searched for anything that could save him. He bargained with the giant, offering to balance his eyesight if he would put Conall down. Once free from the giant's grasp, Conall sent about gathering hay and manure, only to then press them into the giant's good eye, saying that would balance out the eyesight if neither eye could see. The giant screamed and rushed to block the exit of the cave. Conall was forced to hide within the cave for the rest of the day and through the night. As morning came, the giant allowed his goats to pass him, counting each of them as their fur rubbed against his leg, and wandered out into the grassy field beyond. Conall held back the largest of the herd and silently killed it so he could cover himself in the fur and crawl out into the field. Once free, Conall turned and told the giant that he had been bested. The giant laughed, calling to the child that he was so impressed with the boy's cunning, and for this he would give Conall a magic golden ring to honor his wits. Once the ring was on Conall's finger, the giant called, "Ring, where are you?" And the ring responded, calling back to the giant and leading the blind giant directly to Conall. Conall could not take the ring off, as the magic had sealed itself to his skin. The ring continued to call to the giant as Conall attempted to run. Not able to remove the ring, Conall saw no other option but to cut off his finger and throw it in the water. The giant followed the calls into the waves and drowned. Conall ended his story by showing the king his missing finger. The king agreed to spare his second youngest son, and once again told Conall that another story would be needed to spare the next. Conall then began to tell a story from when he was about the king's age. He had just married his wife, but had yet to have a son. One day he had been walking along the coast near his home, when he found a boat floating along the waters filled with treasure. He attempted to step into the boat, only for it to begin floating away with him towards an island he had never seen before. Once on the island, he entered a ruined castle, where he found a young woman crying above a child, holding a knife to its throat. Conall ran to the woman and tried to stop her, only for her to explain that the giant had taken over the island and wanted to eat the baby. She wanted to spare her child from the suffering of a cooking pot's death, but wasn't able to hurt her own child. Conall looked around and saw that the castle was filled with corpses, and he suggested cutting meat from one of them instead. The woman cried and said that the giant knew how many bodies there were, and if he did not see the baby join them, he would be furious. Conall offered to lay with the bodies, should the giant want to count them, and help the woman cut old meat from another body laying about. When the giant arrived for his meal, he quickly noticed the taste of the tough meat and demanded to count the bodies. With Conall lying above them, the giant determined all was in order. However, the giant was still hungry, so he picked up the body that looked the freshest for the woman to cook, throwing Conall in the cooking pot. The giant told the woman to cook while he took a nap. As soon as the giant leaves, the woman quickly helped Conall escape and tell him that the giant could only be killed by his own weapon. A giant spear. It was far too large for any human to manage, but just small enough that could be maneuvered. Conall spent time pushing the spear so it rested against the cooking pot aimed towards the giant's door. He then used the castle ropes to tie the giant's feet together. Once satisfied with his trap, Conall screamed in the giant's ear to wake him. The large creature bolted up, stumbled forward, and fell upon his own weapon. With the woman and baby safe, the three of them boarded the boat and returned to land. Once Conall had finished his story, he looked to the king, waiting for an answer if one of his sons would be spared. But it was not the young ruler's voice who he heard. Instead, it was that of the king's mother. She asked Conall if that was really truly him that saved her all those years ago. For she was the woman trapped on the island, and the baby he had spared had grown to be the king. The king recognized that he owed Conall his life and allowed all of the sons their freedom, and any favor the family should request. Conall and his sons left the kingdom on the king's steed, carrying bags of gold and silver. The bags were brought to their house, while the steed was taken to Conall's own king, so his family could live safely for the rest of their days. Thank you for watching. I really loved how this one turned out, especially the process of trying to find a real castle that I could model my build off of. And then I had to remember to tack on the stables at the end of it due to the whole point of the story, but I still think it turned out amazing. If you guys have any stories you would like me to cover next, please leave them in the comments, as I would love to take a look and read through all these little folk tales. And as always, bye bye!